The next session on ventures and corporate venturing. Thanks, Barry. Mark Silva, CEO of Kite.
Thank you, Andreas. Appreciate it. Cheers. Cheers. Come on up, panel. Let's get this rolling really quickly. So while we're doing this, I believe this stage has particular significance for at least one of our speakers, Telmo, who has been tweeting and bragging to his friends that he's actually on stage here. So this is kind of a big deal, this stage. Let's give a big hand and make all of his dreams come true here for Telmo. He brought down the house. Excellent. Thank you.
Next time, I will not tell anything.
No, fair enough. Embarrassment is good. All right, so what are we doing here today? We're going to be talking about the startup ecosystem. Kite, my company, is actually putting a big data layer over the startup ecosystem so that big brands and enterprises and agencies that are leaning into the system can make some sense out of it and actually start getting some deals done. And the three panelists we have here today are actually three of the most leading experts in this area. Their companies, from Pernod Ricard to Unilever and Orange, are doing some incredibly leading programs and have been a lot of thought about that. And we'd like to bring that to the crowd here to talk about it. So why don't you introduce yourself with a Twitter-like start?
Okay, right. So Twitter-like, let's see how I can go. Antonia Mccahon, I am the Global Digital Acceleration Director at Pernod Ricard, based in Paris. My remit is digital acceleration, covering four main areas, so new content experience and media models, data smart action, everywhere commerce and new routes to market, and finally change management in this area. And obviously everything around digital innovation, new services is part of that remit.
All right, and I think we just had 3 tweets there. We'll take that, and I'll retweet them. All right.
If you take it as an acronym, you could probably get it in 140 characters. So good afternoon, my name's Jeremy Bassett. I'm from at Unilever Foundry, there we go. And Unilever Foundry is our platform for collaboration. It's our platform for bringing the outside in, and it's our platform for pioneering the future of marketing.
Great, Telmo.
Okay. Good afternoon. Telmo Pérez from the Orange Group. I'm the head of digital corporate development, where we basically launched an acceleration program 2 years ago, starting in the US. And now we are focusing on all our venturing and let's say investment arm for startups and starting to work with them as well.
That's great. And so let's, because this is a big data conference, let's kind of unpack some of the data from your program so far. How serious of an investment are you making? Jeremy, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, sure. So we've been in this space for quite a while. We launched Unilever Ventures, our VC arm, in 2000. And since then, we've now got around half a billion euros under investment, 500 million also under investment into the startup community. We launched the Unilever Foundry almost 12 months ago, and since launching the Foundry, we've been actively piloting startups. So we've launched 60 pilots with different startups around the world, in 35 countries around the world. And we've put just over $5 million into those startups in the last 11 months. And we're actively looking at ramping that up in the coming years.
And just to unpack that a little bit, the $5 million are actually paid pilot programs, not investment, not...
That's right, yeah, these are paid pilots. We're not taking equity stakes. The equity discussion is a separate discussion that happens between ventures and the startup. So this is really about trying to give startups the cash they need to do a great pilot with a big brand.
Antonia?
Yeah, so at Pernod Ricard, we're a little bit more decentralized than at Unilever and Orange. And so I guess we've been in the space for probably 2 to 3 years. We've had various projects like in China, anti-counterfeit, and we've got, rather than giving an overall big figure, probably I could say that we've had around 10 scalable projects that have seen the light of day. And that's generally what we look at. So, you know, we may work with 300 different startups, but if we can get 2 to 5 scalable projects out every year that have real business impact, then we're happy with that. We do have 2 central bodies that look at this type of thing, at sort of digital service and data-oriented innovation. That's the Digital Distillery, which does matchmaking making between startups and business briefs, but also the data lab that looks at different use cases for data that could have business impact.
Great. Telmo.
Okay, on our side, as many other operators, we started to invest on digital in around the year 2000, but well, more on M&A way, are focusing on digital advertising. But well, the more relevant thing is what we have been doing in the last 2 years when we try to articulate all this, including the legacy in this open innovation and digital corporate development division, where basically on the acceleration side, we have set up already 6 locations, 3 where innovation is, and we are not an operator, San Francisco, Tel Aviv, and Tokyo, and 3 others where we are an operator and we can impact the local ecosystem. France, Poland, and Ivory Coast so far, and 3 other countries coming up very, very soon. Indeed, in these programs, we try to work with very close with the startups on the key topics or key domains that we are looking at in order to push our strategy on new revenue lines as fintech, quality of the network, customer experience, and Internet of Things and big data. And in parallel to this, we are setting up, as I said before, all the venturing initiatives, whether to invest or to fund these startups, or more importantly, scouting and funding some others all around the world that could support our future strategy when we have already committed, for example, with the investor community on doing $1 billion revenues in 3 years in new domains as connected things and fintech, which are quite new for us.
So this is the future, not just of marketing, but also future of business, the future of your companies that we're betting on here. How many of you are startups out here and want to do business with these guys? How many are doing business with these guys? Okay, about a lot less. Okay, well, this is a big, big challenge that isn't just the startup challenge of trying to get to the big startups, get to the big enterprise companies, but for the startups, how do we actually take the big machine that, you know, we buy $1 billion of vanilla a year, that scale of procurement and those processes that are about big scale, how do we actually create these programs that make it so that you can work with startups at the speed of startups? And maybe you guys can unpack some of the programs that you've been doing. I'll let anybody take it.
Yeah, so I'm happy to kick that one off. So I think for corporates wanting to get into this space, there's 2 key things that we have to bear in mind. One is the cultural change that we have to enable our organization to go through to embrace this method of innovation. And then the second thing is the framework that we have to create to enable this way of interaction as well. I've been at Unilever for 11 years, and the organization has always asked our marketeers to experiment and pioneer and take risks. But if you're the brand manager on Marmite in the UK, and you've got one budget, one campaign where you're spending €5 million behind it in the next year, you can't screw it up because you won't get your growth, and you shouldn't screw it up because it's €5 million. So you shouldn't be playing around with €5 million. So we've never really created that framework for experimentation, and I think that's really what Foundry tries to do, is create a framework for experimentation that enables our marketeers.
Let's talk about the Foundry. You talked about 60 deals, but this isn't just ad tech, it's consumer insights, it's like every part of the marketing stack, every part of the business stack, go-to-market, consumer engagement that you're looking at, is that correct?
Yeah, right. So we started with digital marketing just because it's an easy place to start, and you can start and you can move into pilot very, very quickly. But we've also realized that there's innovation that's happening beyond our organization in every sphere that touches our organization. And so we started digital marketing, as you said, research, but we're also moving into new business models and other business enablers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, building on from what Jeremy said, I think for us, one of the key challenges, again, was the cultural change and actually getting traction within the company. And I guess we've had an approach that's very much been around small bites at the elephant. So we've, in each occasion, really chosen real business challenges that speak to more than one market. So for example, one of the first challenges that got people really interested not only in big or smart data as well as innovation was the anti-counterfeit or anti-theft issues or challenges that we have in a lot of emerging markets. It's just not a problem for Pernod Ricard, it's a worldwide problem. I think it's around $36 billion problem around the world. And for us, it costs us tens of millions of dollars a year. And actually just applying innovation and data smart approaches to traceability of products, which then led to consumer engagement, was a massive win for us, which obviously was a massive immediate win, which gets traction in the business, and then people become much more excited about the very next project. I think as well, you need this notion of speed, and so at some point in time, what we've tried to do with the distillery is to have sort of almost a reverse incubation period, where startups come in and actually spend time with us. They learn about the Pernod Ricard business. They learn about logistics, distribution, what our main customer challenges are. So they're already pre-briefed and hot about our business and what we're doing before we actually start introducing them to the different affiliates, so they can start doing that sort of brainstorming. And then we're looking quite quickly for pilots, within a 3-month to 6-month period to get up and running.
So I think there's a real insight here for a lot of the people in the room that are actually trying to get access to these big companies, which is you're probably going through the brand door, or you're trying to go through the media agency door or other doors, but these accelerators and innovation groups within these companies are an open aperture. They're very open. In fact, I know by the end we're going to plug an event that you've got, that you're going to be sponsoring for Cannes, that startups can apply for and get involved in. But it seems like in these areas like the distillery and the foundry, and certainly the Orange Fab, there's this bias towards action, and it's a great place for startups to be able to enter, or even more mature companies that are trying a new business model to come to the company and pitch that to you guys. And Telmo, would you like to share a little bit about, I think I met you guys specifically through the Orange Fab, which was an incubator in San Francisco that then went global, right?
Yes. Well, still, just taking the lead from Antonia, I put out that obviously corporates are still different animals than startups, and it's not always still easy to deal with us. But I would say that investing on a startup is quite easy. You think they could add value to you, you put money, and they are okay. But what they really expect from you is to work with you, because sometimes customers and let's tell a commercial relationship adds more value than the real funding. And that is, let's tell, the real challenge for the corporates, whether on doing a pilot, as they said, or even just a procurement or a contract with us, because our process is, let's tell, is old-fashioned. And we ask for 5 years balance sheet and P&L and things like that, and they don't have you in.
Please sign this MSA. Yeah, please sign this MSA with your firstborn and all your IP rights to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in working with the startups, there is a lot of a big organization behind that needs to change and to be transformed. And then going back to the Orange Fab program. Sure, what you said, we decided to start in a startup mode in San Francisco, because we are so far from Paris, we are so far from the business, we are so close to innovation and to the startups, and they are a tiny team that they could work like that, just innovate, fail, iterate, and that's the reason why the pilot there was a success, and we decided to brought that into our European operations, and now even Africa, and even 2 other countries, as Japan, as I said.
Yeah, and what's great is, we've got 3 companies, each on a different journey, but the journey that I saw a few years ago before I started Kite was that people come out to the Valley, but it's really about hypothesis and testing different. Is this Internet of Things ever going to be a thing? What does the mobile stack mean to us? It was about hypothesis testing, but as soon as it started moving into hackathons and co-location, acceleration, it eventually went into partnerships, investment, and mergers and acquisitions. And you guys represent the entire spectrum here, or some version of that. You're on that journey, but every single large company is going through this journey right now. Is that correct? I mean, we're seeing a lot of our brethren out there in the Valley. About 77% of Fortune 100 now have some sort of scouting investment. So what advice would you have to any of the corporates that are trying, media companies, any kind of company that's trying to do this? What are some of the pieces of advice you'd have for setting this up?
So I think You know, I think the reason that we're seeing such a plethora of activity in this space is because everyone's waking up to the fact that the amount of innovation that happens outside of our four walls or outside of the four walls of our traditional partners is so immense and also so valuable to the core business. And so we're all looking at how can we tap into that? How can we make our corporates, our businesses more efficient, more effective at what they do? In terms of how to do this, I think the key is to start at multiple levels across the business. When we started this, we took senior level, our senior leaders on a tour of Silicon Valley, and at the same time, we also got a whole bunch of our marketeers at all levels of the organization engaged in mentoring startups. And I think the first thing that you have to ask is, how can you add value to this ecosystem? And for a company like Unilever, we're the world's second biggest advertiser. So we've got great marketing expertise that we can share with the startups, and we do that through mentoring. We've got a huge ad budget that we can potentially redeploy into new technologies that we think should be cultivated and developed further. And that's what we do through Foundry. And then we've got a big balance sheet, and that's what we do through Unilever Ventures.
Well, and you've also got beautiful assets. I mean, who wouldn't want to have the Dove or the Axe campaign as the case study, right?
Right, they're good things to work on, right? So, yeah, exactly. So I think the key thing is to ask, what can you bring to this what can you bring to this space? And then the second thing is to engage people across all levels of the organization.
Yeah, I would very much agree with that, because I think one of our key barriers to entering into this space in the first instance was that we don't necessarily want to spend a wad of cash on startups where we're not really sure of what the business impact would be. And actually, one of the biggest lessons learned was when we started breaking down what do we have to offer startups. Actually, quite often it's not about money. It is about the opportunity to work with big brands at scale, with new media models, advertising models, and that sort of thing. And you know, once we started sort of opening the door of Pernod Ricard and saying, well, come in and be part of the team and start working with us and thinking differently and collaborating on real problems like that, it was the day that it actually became interesting for us.
You know, if I were starting a company today, and I've just started one 2 years ago, I would start the company with working alongside of a Unilever, a Pernod Ricard, and surprise, surprise, I did. And I was looking over your shoulders, learning, and my product matured in 2 years faster than it could have had I been out there in the wild on my own. In the lean startup approach, every single startup should be working with a big brand, in my opinion.
And I think it's win-win, actually, for both of us. Because on the other hand, one of our big challenges as well was that, yeah, you can bring the ComEx and the top-tiered management to the Silicon Valley or to Israel on a digital safari, but you can't scale that throughout the organization. So what happens with the middle management as well, who are quite often the ones who are holding the budgets, who make the day-to-day business decisions, and those guys who are actually going to sponsor the pilot projects? How are you going to reach them? How are you going to give them mind-opening experiences? And actually, this is a great way of doing it, of actually making startups part of the business, and there's this osmosis that goes on.
Yeah, so these programs, I mean, you were even telling me earlier that you actually look for a business unit at Orange Fab as a way of greenlighting something going forward. Is there a country or a discipline or a department or a business unit who raises their hand? Because this is all about showing the rest of the organization what good looks like, right?
Exactly. First thing you need is to be really convinced that you want to do this and you want to develop a strategy on open innovation, and for that, well, you need to get the engagement of the whole organization, from the top management to the business units, because if you want to do it, you're gonna do it. If you do it for the sake of being cool, it's going to be a complete disaster. So for that is, let's say, quite key. Then you need the commitment of working with the startups. Otherwise, they are going to feel they are wasting their time, and they are not reaching the objectives. And let's say that you will not get your objectives. So that is quite important. So that's the reason why we include heads of department or business units in the selection of the startups that we bring to the accelerator program. So we got the commitment, at least the commitment of one business unit for, let's tell, at least with the willingness of working with this startup. And third thing I would say is that it is important that you set up KPIs and that you measure your activity, especially looking at how you are impacting the business, not only the innovation.
KPIs because people seem to perform to how they're rewarded. And you mentioned earlier, the CEO came back from this conference saying we're going to get aggressively into, what were the numbers?
Exactly. For example, in our case, we have committed to work with at least 500 startups by 2020, where I would tell that around 100 will be funded, and the other 400 will work with us through the acceleration program or just through commercial partnerships.
Yeah, my guess is after year one, you're going to move those numbers up because you're going to find it's going to be easier. But in a couple minutes, we're going to be actually sitting here judging some of the ad tech startups that are actually on stage. And so it'd be great to actually give some tips to the startups in terms of what can they do outside of just contacting you, email Jeremy. I'm kidding. Jeremy.Bassett@Unilever.com. What can they do in order to begin working with you as well? What are some of the tips you have to prepare for working with a scale-up, with a company at scale?
So by all means, feel free to email me. I mean, we're all friends here. But the reason we started the Foundry was really to create that big front door for people wanting to engage with Unilever. And what we're trying to do there is make it easy for you to engage with us. So through Foundry, if you go to foundry.unilever.com, you can see all the opportunities there are to pilot. And these are real briefs. And to your point, I mean, what we do is we always allocate a specific budget for each brief, which also has a specific business owner, so that when you apply, that idea will move into action. So that's by far the best way for you to engage with us. In terms of what we're looking for, we're really looking for a solution that helps us work more efficiently or more effectively. We really look at those two criteria, and ideally both of those.
So to unbundle that, that's a euphemism for if you help us do what we're doing today better. We're doing marketing, we're going to market, we're selling stuff that might be falling off the truck. If you can help us either in our sustaining activity or activity that is near in, there's an open invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. So the briefs are all online, and you can check them out. Yeah.
Antonia, any advice for the startups in terms of how they can prepare to work with Pernod?
Yeah, so I mean, very similarly, and again, one of the key reasons behind the distillery was to be able to help startups understand more about Pernod Ricard, what we do, and our key challenges. So efficiency and effectiveness of our business model, pushing our business model into a business model of the future, and we've sort of obviously what we call last 3 feet transformation. Which is that moment of conversion is very key to us. How do we use digital and data kind of driven services to make that more effective and efficient? But yeah, and it spans everywhere from logistics to customer management to consumer engagement, and obviously new routes to market.
Telmo.
No, what I would tell once they get into the programs, as Orange Fact for instance, I would tell that be patient. And because they need to get used that this is a big corporate and maybe an email is not reply, not even in a couple of weeks. But we are a big company with plenty of resources that they could leverage. So they need to push and push and push, be very proactive. Once they are in our perimeter, sooner or later we will boost them. So it's not about, okay, these guys, they are not taking care of me or whatever.
Patience is incredibly tough for a startup. It's not the profile of a startup, though, or most of the salespeople in the room here. A quick yes or no is great, but a long maybe is death for a startup. So and again, each of these programs are trying to supercharge that relationship, right? But patience is not necessarily the virtue of a founder, right?
No, exactly. But they need to work with the people that are very reactive and willing to work with them, and with some others that could be quite key for them, just to wait, but still pushing and pushing. Because once, as I said, they are with us, sooner or later things start to happen. But they need to get that flexibility of dealing with an animal as a big corporate.
So that's great tip for the startup. Inject some wisdom of patience, because it's true. If you think about how long it takes to fundraise, sometimes herding cats and you know, it takes a little bit of time and traction. It takes multiple ways in, but eventually things start taking traction if you've got something that's very, very valuable.
Yeah, exactly. And for example, this is more for business. When we talk about the Orange Fab or the Orange Digital Ventures, we commit to give an answer in a few days. For example, in the venturing activity, our commitment is to reply, let's tell, in 30 days, the latest. And for that, as you mentioned before, let's tell, anyone who could approach to Orange through a business unit, through the president, and I got some proofs of that, or whoever, or our website, whether the Orange Fab or the Orange Digital Ventures, you will be, let's tell, you will get a reply and probably feedback, and at least a meeting. And in fact, if we see that maybe you are in an early stage or you are not, let's tell, with the good timing for the Orange Fab, we will try to forward you, to derive you to the right business unit, so they know about you at least, okay?
Outstanding. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Any questions from the audience around the corporate innovation? Michelle.
Hello. This is a question about the Foundry. So I'm on the website, which is so I'm just curious, what's the volume of submissions you're getting? I'm looking right now at the Fruitaire video about sliced fruit. Can you just talk about kind of the volume of submissions that you're getting?
Yeah, sure. So, so we've said yes a lot. We've said yes to doing pilots with 60 companies. We've said no a lot more. There's been over 3,000 companies that we've reviewed or have applied to the Foundry through the Foundry directly and also through our scouts. So we've said no quite a lot. The part of the website that you're on is actually for creatives and designers. And there's another part, if you click on pilots there, you'll see an opportunity for tech companies, which is probably more for people in this room. From the creatives and designers side, though, the part that you're on at the moment, we normally get about 100 to 150 submissions for each brief that we put up. So, yeah. And we get a similar number for tech.
I think the no is interesting because even just like with investment, you talked a little bit about fit. I think there's a Goldilocks moment where two gals or two guys in a garage, someone like Unilever with your scale might crush, although maybe a brand, a fleet-footed discipline like CMI or something like that might be able to implement it, but largely Unilever would look for something that's at a larger scale, whereas I know that Nike and Red Bull or some of these other brands only want to find two people in a garage. So there's a right fit for these companies as well as programs as well. It's not whether you've got a good idea or not, it's just about fit, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's important. I think it's easy for big corporates to start with big players, and then perhaps over time, as we get more confident, to work our way back into working with smaller companies. But I think the other thing that we've realized is that the thing that we fundamentally bring to the startup ecosystem is our scale. And so what we're really looking for is a technology that is ready to scale. Now, sometimes that's two guys in a garage. Often it's not. Often it's more of an established business. But that early stage of iterating and learning is best done, I think, independently or with smaller, more nimble partners, perhaps in a company like Unilever. That would be my advice to startups. Timing is quite critical as to when you engage with us.
So I've got another question. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, back there. I'll repeat it for you if you don't have a mic. Oh, there we go.
I'd like to commend all of you. And I would also argue that you're a bit of an anomaly. With all the startups in the room, I'm actually on my 9th, actually we're past the startup phase. But the most important thing sometimes for startups to do is to recognize when they have somebody like you. And there's a whole lot that aren't like you. And it's really important.
Hang on a sec. I'm going to interrupt you there because it's not an anomaly. When we started Kite, 50% of the Fortune 100s had a scouting, a venture, a lab, a recruiting arm out in the valley. It's now at 77%. It's not an anomaly. It's happening in every sector of every business. BD is usually looking at a customer rather than these innovation groups, which may be an interesting new door in.
Right.
Which is why Andreas had us bring this to the ICOM data.
No, and that's a fair point. But it's important for startups to know when to say no, because even with many of mine, you go down a path where you're dealing with somebody who has the allure of a big brand, and what they end up doing is they end up re-engineering and with the hope. So I just like your comment. You've seen the opposite side. Could you share some of your thoughts on the bad stuff that happens?
Well, let me actually address some of it, because we see a lot of these things. No one ever forces an entrepreneur to take their money. So none of these guys are forcing them into something. And so I think you're right. A great CEO does have to have that conviction. My guess is that's something uniform to the ones you actually do business with. There's incredible founders, incredible teams in place, correct?
Yeah. And I think clearly it's a people question as well. I mean, we've met many startups where we think what they're doing is absolutely brilliant, except that the founders, we absolutely know that they will not be able to work with people in our business. Culturally, it's too much of a misfit. And that's a critical ingredient to working together with a startup. So, I mean, I think, you need to be flexible, but also very open to, on both sides, understanding, the dynamics, where the model is focused, and trying to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, and I think, we have talked about corporates and startups here, and in some ways there's a big difference, but in other ways, Unilever's just a 125-year-old startup. And I think, seriously, we're sort of all on the same sort of mission. And I think, to your point, timing is critical. I think we're all adults. We all understand how we can work together for mutual benefit. I think we all bring something unique to the table. And I think it's a matter of having that discussion to help work out how can we really make this work? How can we bring the nimbleness and agility and entrepreneurialism of startups and marry that with the scale and the breadth of corporates? Because I think there's a really big opportunity to be had here.
That's great. Let's end it with that thought. And would you please join me in thanking this panel for sharing such generous insights.